self-determination. A little bit of a breakdown on what we're going to be talking about is this is actually a module that's a pretty high level of self-determination. So as you might be aware or may not be, the program is pretty extensive. And so this first module is kind of just more of an introduction to the program, covers all of the bases of the program. And so we will be stopping here and there in between the presentation to take questions, because I know there will probably be plenty of questions. As we have said, Claudia has said, please use the Q&A for your questions so that we can go there directly to look for any questions that you might have. Also, something to know, and I think Claudia might have mentioned or not, is that this unfortunately will not count as an actual orientation for the program. This is an informational meeting. Unfortunately, this is, if you do not know, State Council is working with DDS on creating a statewide orientation for the program. It is still in its draft form. So this actual module, this presentation that I'm giving today, was actually informed from that actual material, but it has not been finalized. So we won't be able to offer it as an orientation. And actually that curriculum is actually going to be 5 modules. So this is only part of the actual curriculum that would count for the actual orientation. So just to also give you a little heads up on that and what that means. So this is an informational meeting about self-determination. It will not count towards an orientation, but there are orientations being offered at your local regional centers, and very, very shortly, State Council, we will be offering the statewide orientation where you can call in and experience and learn about self-determination in depth through our 5 modules. So just wanted to start the day 2 with that. I am going to now share my screen.
While you share your screen, I just want to let the audience that Joe allow us to record this video or this presentation. So you will find it in our e-learning at the PHP website. And thank you so much for allowing us to record it. We appreciate it. And the families too.
Of course. So as we said, this is going to be a self-determination overview. So how you can have more control in your life. So this is a new way to think about how you can create a personalized program at the regional center. Our learning objectives today are we're going to define the self-determination program. We're going to introduce the principles of self-determination, which is the foundation for this program. We are going to discuss the steps to join the self-determination program. We are going to introduce key roles and parts of the self-determination program. And we're going to talk about the next steps if you are interested in learning more and want to actually and perhaps enroll in the program itself. So what is self-determination? So it's actually an alternate way to get services from your regional center. You are going to use person-centered planning to find your goals. Now, person-centered planning is still an intricate part of the traditional system that you should already be utilizing when you're doing your IPP with the regional center. But self-determination actually does focus and is centered around a person-centered plan. We want to be more person-centered. We want to create programs that are individualized to the participant, to the person receiving services from the regional center. And your services and supports are picked by you. So that's another thing that's going to be interesting and different about self-determination. There is choice in the traditional system where you can choose from different vendors at the regional center, but now in self-determination, you're open to more choices because now you're not limited to just vendored services and supports. So the supports and services that you can pick, they're going to help you reach your defined outcomes for your individual program plan, which is that IPP that I mentioned earlier in the community. And they're going to also promote inclusion. This program is about opening up new possibilities for receiving supports and services and really being in the community when you're creating your plan and doing things like working at a shop that's in the community where you're integrated, going to the gym perhaps, where you're working alongside other people within your own community. Again, we are working on more inclusive programs and supports in self-determination. You must meet certain rules though to be paid for these supports to be paid for. So we'll get kind of into that too. So there are still some policies and regulations that are shaped around this program that you will have to follow in order to be able to pay for other different services that are not in the traditional system. And because this program is voluntary, you can choose to enroll and also choose to leave the program whenever you wish. If you do choose to leave the self-determination program, the regional center is obligated to then hold an IPP meeting, create a new IPP around what your transition will look like to the traditional system again, and also give you the supports to do that transition as well. So remembering that the self-determination program is an alternative way. You can choose to use self-determination instead of the traditional system in order to receive services and supports from the regional center. But then you can also decide that, hey, maybe this isn't right for me right now, or this isn't quite what I was hoping it would be. So I'm going to go back to where my traditional service, and you can always do that at any time. The one speculation or the one thing you have to think about when you do that is that when you leave the self-determination program, you cannot return to it for 12 months. So a whole year has to pass before you can go back to the self-determination program. So just remember that when you're thinking about, okay, I want to enter self-determination and okay, I'm here, this isn't really working out as the way I wanted to. I'm kind of want to go back to where I was with the traditional system. Okay, I'm going to move back. And if I want to come back to self-determination, I will have to wait 12 months to do that. So what is self-determination? Let's go in a little more depth here. So you're going to have a team, you're going to have supports. That's the most important thing to remember. And your team is very crucial in self-determination. There's a need for a lot of communication. There's the need for a lot of shared information to make sure that your program that is personalized to the participant, to you, really targets your goals when it comes to your IPP, your individual program plan. Your SC, your service coordinator, is still going to be involved. They should be a part of your team, but your team might change depending on where you are in the process of self-determination. Maybe when you're doing person-centered planning, you're involving a larger group of people because you want to include your neighbor who knows about certain aspects of your life. You want to include your teacher who helps you with certain things. You want to include perhaps your religious leader who knows you well. And that might mean that that particular team is going to look a little bigger than maybe when you're dealing with creating your individual program plan with the regional center. Maybe you're not going to have as many people at the table when you're doing that. But the point is your team is crucial and it changes, and you get to decide who you're going to involve and when, basically. So remember that team is a really important support for you during this process and really helps for you to create a program that is personalized to you and will address the needs for your IPP. Remember, your services and supports have to directly connect to your individual program plan that you write with the regional center. Also, something to remember is that if you move to a different regional center while you're in self-determination, your plan follows you to that regional center. So you'll still have the same plan that you created with self-determination. That might mean that if you've moved, you might need to hire new people or look at different services, but the plan that you created originally will still follow you to that new regional center. An example of self-determination that gives you the ability to basically plan and control your own life. You're choosing services and supports that you want. And again, you have an individualized budget to hire people to help you in carrying out your goals from your IPP, your individual program plan. So depending on your age or the participant's age, you might have a parent or you might have a primary caregiver who's going to really help to inform kind of what that looks like. It always depends on kind of that dynamic and where your supports are. It's always remembering, again, it's about communication and information sharing. What does the participant want? What does the participant need? What do we know from our different areas of actual supports and circles and people in our lives that can inform that conversation when we're talking about person-centered planning. And for those of you who aren't familiar, but hopefully you are, the individual program plan is actually, I'm going to read my definition, an action plan that talks need to live the way you want, identifies your goals, services, and supports so you can be more independent and participate in the community. It's a written agreement and contract between you and the regional center, and it is written in a way that you can understand. So for those of you who aren't too familiar with the individual program plan, the IPP, that is a definition of what that is, and you should have one, or you do have one if you are a client with the regional center, and hopefully you have seen it, you have been involved in that development, and you know exactly what that is addressing when I say IPP. And an example of kind of the self-determination program is, we have a scenario here. We have Amy. So Amy has been receiving day program services from an agency that doesn't have activities or personnel that match her personal or professional interests. She enjoys photography and would like to have staff that share her interests and who may help her connect to the world of photography. For example, help her create photography Instagram account. So having an Instagram account and being able to take pictures and posting them, she wants help to be able to do that. And integrate photography into a layer of her goals. So actually making it part of her IPP, her learning photography. What is that going to, maybe she wants to be a professional photographer in the future. So her goal is then to actually learn how to take pictures, learn how to post them, how to edit them professionally. So that can be something that can be put into her IPP, and then services and supports can be used or created to help support and help her reach that goal. So that's an example of photography being the motivation for her to work on her socialization and other goals in her IPP. So that's a way that you can think about how you create you take a person-centered want or goal. She wants to be a photographer, she likes photography, and then you make a goal on your IPP, and then that is when now that's on your IPP, you can go out into the community, or regional center can look at rendered services and see where we can create a program that will help Amy reach that goal of becoming a photographer. So I am going to pause for a second to see if we have any questions.
Yes, we do have some questions. And there was a comment that our screen is on what is self-determination. It says the screen that Joe is talking about is not coming up. This is still the initial screen.
It's still on the original screen?
No, I see that. What is self-determination? Is that the screen that you wanted to share with them?
Yes, that is still the screen we're on. We are good.
Okay. So let me start reading some questions. It says, SDP is an addition to the traditional services or instead?
So SDP is instead of the traditional service system. So you can receive services from the regional center under the traditional model, or you can choose to go into self-determination and receive your services under the self-determination program model. So it is two separate ways of receiving services. You won't, there are certain little services that you will still get from the traditional system in self-determination, but to make things simple, yes, they are two separate systems and you will not use both of them at the same time.
Thank you, Joe. SDP follow if you move out of the county? I guess you talk about it a little bit, but will you repeat that?
Yeah, so self-determination is statewide, so it won't matter what county you're in, and it will move. It's basically by regional center. So there are multiple counties in certain regional centers, regions. So if you move from a different county that's still in your same regional center region, it's not going to affect anything. If you move to a different county that then moves you to a different regional center as well, that is when it matters, and then your program follows you to that regional center. It's overseen by regional centers, not by specific counties. Hopefully that answers that question.
Great. Is there a starting age to be qualified for SDP?
No, actually, anyone of any age can join at this point. They did actually open it up to people that are younger than 3. It was that you had to be 3 years old or older. And now it actually has been open where there are certain situations where you could be younger than 3 and still qualify for self-determination.
So there is only certain situations where you can be 0 to 3 and still access SDP. Yes, not everybody can access it. Only a few people would.
So under 3, there are certain speculations that you have to meet. So you have to qualify for services from the regional center in order to actually be able to access self-determination. So if you're under 3 and you haven't qualified for services yet, then you wouldn't be able to access self-determination yet.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Would we use the IPP the service coordinator developed or a new one just for SDP?
Yes, you should be developing a new IPP because you do create a new person-centered plan. That should hopefully mean that you're going to find things and see things that you need to add to your IPP. You need to create a new IPP. So yes, you will create a new IPP when you join self-determination, when you're going through this process.
Thank you. So one tiny thing that I want to share with the parents again, or the attendees, we are not monitoring the chat. So if you're posting your question on the chat, I highly suggest you to put it in the Q&A because it's only Joe and me today. So we don't have more people to monitor in the chat. So we're going to use the chat only for technical support or help. So please, please, please put all your questions on the Q&A. Okay, we read that one. For adult client, can individualized budget hire the client parents to help in carrying out IPP?
So the parent cannot get paid in self-determination, much like in the traditional system. The primary care provider isn't able to be a vendor or provider. Now, it depends on also the relationship and how old the actual participant is. So that's kind of more of an individualized question. If it's a minor, so if the participant is still a minor and still is still being, cared for by the parent or primary care provider, they cannot be paid to do anything in self-determination. If it is someone who is an adult, the participant's an adult, then the parent is no longer the primary care provider technically. There's no fiscal obligation, technically financial obligation. So then there's the situations where they could be providers technically. So again, it depends on the unique situation, but technically in general, if you are the primary care provider, if you are the spouse of a participant, you won't be able to be paid for a certain thing, for providing services in self-determination.
Thanks. Moving out of the state, for 2 to 4 years, I plan to return to California. May I continue my self-determination upon my return?
Yes, so you would be able to then return back to self-determination. Once you came back, because basically you'll be ending your plan. A year will have passed. You'll be able to come back and start again.
Is there an income cap to receive the program?
No, there is no income cap for the program,
no. Okay, I have one in Spanish here. Yeah, she's asking about the ages that people can participate in self-determination. Will you repeat that again, please?
So yes, basically 3 years old or older, and you qualify for services with the regional center. And there's going to be a video later that's kind of going to also go into that a little more too. But also there are certain situations where children that are younger than 3 can also qualify, but they also have to qualify for services under the regional center if they're 3 and younger as well.
We have the same service under regional center and then more hours through SDP.
So your traditional service, your traditional program is not going to basically, when we'll go over this later, I think a little more. Okay. But basically, your program from your traditional system is not going to mirror your program necessarily in self-determination. So it's not that you go to self-determination because you want more hours of respite, for example. That's not necessarily how it will work. It could work like that, but you're supposed to be, it's more thinking about outside the box, like what other services do you need that will support the participant to, again, achieve their IPP goals.
How can I join to self-determination? You're going to talk about it?
We will talk about that later. So
okay,
we will
great.
hit that later.
Okay. What would be the benefit in switching programs? How are they different?
So we will
talk about it later.
Yeah, so we can talk about that later, but the benefit, and it depends on, again, it's unmet needs in the traditional system, And also if you have ideas of how you can create a support or service that is not accessible through the traditional service, so that isn't vended through the regional center. So you'll want to think about that. Now, if you're completely happy with your current program and you're happy with how you receive services from the regional center, then you might not really have any benefit from joining self-determination. The people that have really benefited from self-determination are people who weren't able to access certain services because they weren't able to find providers, because they weren't able to, they didn't have any vendored community services or services in general in their area. So they needed to go outside of that vendored list of services to be able to get supports, basically.
So how about we continue, because we have a large number of questions here. Yeah. So I'm sure some of those questions are going to be answered with the next part of the presentation. So go ahead.
So next we have a video, and what I'm going to do is, for people who need a different language, I'm going to actually in the chat put the video link. So I will show you that basically when you hit play, I'm going to pause it for a minute just to show. So anyone who needs a different language, there is the closed caption here. So you can click that for closed caption, but to change your language, you can hit the little gear thing. And okay, of course it's going to be difficult for me. And under subtitles here, you can go to auto translate here, and then you can pick a different language. Sorry, I skipped. So if you need to change the language for the video, you can do that by just going down and finding Spanish or finding Vietnamese, and then you can watch it in your own language. But I am going to play it now in English for us.
Thank you, Joe.
Hello, I am Santa Clara. I'm the Director of the Department of Development Services. It's an honor to share with you the unbelievable successful path of creating a pathway of freedom for individuals we serve and their families. It's called self-determination. Self-determination is built on some very basic principles that you and I live by. The opportunity to make choices for where you live and with whom you're going to live. It's a personal freedom, and that personal freedom is best exhibited when you're in your own place. Your family is intimately involved, and part of that is an extension of a good life.
Hi, my name is Willie West. I've been in the self-determination pilot project at the Republican Regional Center for the last 15 years. When I entered the pilot, I was 18 years old, and it was a lottery system. And I didn't know if I was going to be part of it or not, and I didn't even know what it was going to be, but I was all for it. Self-determination program changed my life. It helped me grow as a human being. Like an awesome job at Cruz. I'm part of society, and it just feels wonderful. The services I find the most beneficial is community living. I have a caregiving company that comes in the morning to help me get up out of bed. I have transportation.
We have a child with a very, very rare chromosome condition. And I think the fact that we have the options and the choices, it's hard, but it's not as hard.
I don't know how we would do it without self-determination. I honestly don't. It has been that good for our family and for our child.
We have an 8-year-old son named Oscar Antonio who's been diagnosed with Down syndrome.
It did take some time for us to understand what were the options, what was the help, and the regional center was where we first walked in, and they've been amazing. They've helped us tremendously.
Self-determination will give us flexibility, and we fully expect he'll have the lifestyle that he merits and deserves.
The starting point for us is we have principles that have been established through our pilot that for us there are just 4. Freedom, that's freedom of choice. authority over the services and products that we choose to have, support from the regional center because it is responsible for providing things that may be helpful to our child to promote his cognitive development as well as physical health, safety, and quality of life. And then fourth, and importantly, is responsibility. And responsibility is really accountability for the funds that we receive to expend on services and products.
My name is Maria Marquez, and I was the first person in the state of California to have my budget signed under the self-determination pilot project. Each participant under the self-determination will have their own individual budget. And that budget is for the whole year, where they get to pick and choose their services and pull out of their budget. Like my budget, what I used it was to get a computer so that I can get a good job.
Your budget is based on your plan, and your plan is what your needs are for the year. And then your budget is how much money the regional center will spend on which.
You know what the funds are that you're going to receive. And then at the end of each month, you submit a report that tells you what you started with, what you expended your funds on, what was left over, how the funds have been expended, and what has actually occurred. That requires work. That's the responsibility part.
Self-determination gives us the ability to really create a customized program for our son. And at the end of the day, it's not really us. It's going to be what he wants.
You have more flexibility and self-determination to say, he doesn't fit in this slot, but I think we can create a new slot.
With self-determination, the door is open. We can access those services and don't have to wait for a long time. We'll be able to create a self-centered plan specific for him.
You can sign up for the self-determination program by going to the informational meetings, talking to your service coordinator, and even talking to your family about it so that everybody's aware of what's going on.
For anyone who's interested, the first thing that I would recommend that you do is that you let your regional center know and make sure that you attend the first orientation, which explains to parents the responsibility and all the work, because there is a lot of work, but it's also all worth it.
You've heard from some of the hearts and strong feelings of both people who are going to be participating in self-determination, as well as their parents who are going to support those participants. It's a great celebration that we are experiencing. Imagine that, a good life. What are the components of a good life? It's the opportunity to make decisions for yourself.
I am self-determined and I am in control.
Yo estoy en control.
¿Quién no va o está así?
Well, so my teacher. And
So I went home and I told my parents over dinner, I'm gonna move out on my own. And they go, when's that gonna happen? I go in the next 6 months. And I didn't know if that was gonna be the truth. That was my goal. And a year later, I moved out on my own. My mom said that it would never work because of my disability and all this stuff. I've been for 15 years.
So yes, that is just an example, and that's a video that DDS created during actually the pilot years still of the programming. So it is a little older, but it does give you an example of kind of the families that have been involved, the principles of self-determination, kind of the responsibility of being in self-determination, and also just the overreaching of how this program can affect a participant or a family's lives, basically. So I wanted to actually introduce this quote that a lot of our regional officer managers really liked. My great ambition is to secure a speaking part in my own life. And that's what self-determination is really about. It's about ensuring that you are heard. And it's something to get really excited about because we're offering more choice in what your individualized program looks like. And they're opening up a larger basically option on where you can receive services and supports. Now, I think that there was a question that I read, sorry, while the video was going, and someone had asked, so Regional Center has vendor supports, vendor services, vendors that they vendor, and those are the only people or entities that can supply services to you under the traditional service system. In self-determination, you no longer have to receive services from people that are vendored. You can use services from people that are not vendored. So that is why you have more options in self-determination when it comes to creating your program. So again, traditional system requires that you use a vendored service that is vendored by the regional center that you are with, and self-determination allows you to use vendors or entities, companies, businesses, people who are not vendored by the regional center. And also in self-determination, you can still use vendor services as well, but you are now able to not be limited to just vendored services. So hopefully that answers that question as well. And as you saw too, the self-determination process really involves, again, that person-centered planning, really making sure that we're developing the best life for you, for the participant. What are your individual goals? Who is the team that's going to help you get there? What are the services you're going to use to get there? And choose providers that support you and that are really going to help you live your best life. So I do have a quick activity. Let's take a moment to kind of think about what it looks like to be, living our best lives and being person-centered. So I want everyone to just kind of close their eyes for a moment and take a deep breath and just exhale. And then take another deep breath and exhale. And I just want you to imagine you're waking up to a new day. Where are you? Where do you want to be? Did you get up when you wanted? Did you want someone to help you in the morning? What did they do to help you, and how did they do it? What do you want to do today for your routine? Where do you want to start? Who do you want to be around during the day? What kinds of routines are you involved in throughout the day? Do you want to learn a new skill? Are you going to school? Are you going to get a job? Maybe you already have a job. Are you volunteering, or are you just having fun hanging out with friends and playing a game? Are your friends and family members, or are you around friends and family members, or are you meeting new people? So self-determination is about imagining all of these things and then making them happen, asking those personalized questions on what do you want your life to look like? What does the participant want their lives to look like? And really focusing on how goals can help them reach that best life, basically. So you can open your eyes now. And as we discussed in the video, we went over the 5 principles of self-determination. So I'm going to take a moment to go over them thoroughly. Once we go through the 5, we'll pause again and take some questions. But just want to introduce the 5 principles of self-determination. So from the video, we saw the first one is freedom. So the freedom to choose the life you want, to pick your providers and change when needed, control the services, supports, or resources you will use, and choose who helps you. An example of this is, we have another scenario. So Din is 10 years old and lives at home with his parents and extended family. Din and his parents have had a great support system. However, they have felt that the importance of their services being provided by people who speak Vietnamese and know his culture hasn't been acknowledged. Now that determination, he and his family will have the freedom to choose services and supports that fit better with Din's culture and community. So that's the idea of having the freedom of choosing where you can get your supports. Who's going to be helping Din? Is it going to be his neighbor who also is from the Vietnamese community, people who understand his culture, or as different, as opposed to maybe the traditional system where Din had to get supports from a vendor and a certain company, and they only had certain staff that could help. So that's the idea of freedom. The next principle is authority. So authority to control your budget for services, be the employer of your own staff. set your own standards for services and supports, and make your own decisions. So another way to think about authority is the word power. So the participant, the family, you have the power basically when it comes to your program. So that's a way you can think about the principle of authority. Another principle is support. So support to create a group of friends, family, professionals, community members, and others that will help you live your best life. Be successful and productive in the life you choose, make decisions and plan your life, and be valued and contributing to as a member of your community. So support, again, is that team that we talked about earlier too, where again, you choose who is part of your team, you choose who can support you, you look for the people that have other skills, have other access to other things that will help you advance your own goals and achieve, those specific goals within your IPP. So the last two we'll go over. So responsibility. Again, we talked about how this program is you have a lot of responsibility because there's a lot of work involved with creating your program. As you can imagine, now the participant and the family are the ones that are choosing how their services are being provided and who is actually providing them, and actually, having to go through the process of finding those maybe different supports and, employing those different staff members. So that is a process, but as we've seen in this program, it is well worth it and come at the end. Basically, we have found that people are living happier, more successful, and achieving their goals at a better rate, than they were in traditional, is what we're seeing from people who are in self-determination. So responsibility for making decisions in your life and accepting the results of these choices, developing your talents and gifts, and for being as productive as possible, including earning income if you are able and contributing back to others and your community. Proper use of the money in your budget and having a valued role in your community. So again, too, a unique thing about that little sentence there is that accepting the results of your choices as well. So again, since you are in control, this might mean that, things will happen and you might have to, troubleshoot your own problems in the program sometimes. And that's part of the responsibility and having control in your own program now in self-determination is, hey, maybe I hired someone and they are sick today. Do I have a backup support staff that I can call in? How do I, fix that? Whereas in traditional system, you would be working with an agency that employs your support staff, and then they would then have someone to fill in on their actual, staff roster to come in and help you. When you're in self-determination, again, you're in charge of your own program. You might have a staff person who calls in sick. Do you have a backup staff person that can fill in, or are you now maybe not going to have that staff for that specific shift? So again, responsibility and being able to think about all of these different things that could happen within your program to make sure that you're prepared and you accept that could happen and whatnot, and you're happy with that. Confirmation is confirmation that you are the decision maker. Basically, you are the one that is in control. So we are confirming that you are in the driver's seat, that you make the decisions, that you are the leader, working within the system with other partners in this program to make sure that you are working towards your better future, basically. And it's a kind of, again, like the concept of, as we hear in our community a lot, nothing about me without me. So making sure that your voice is heard. We have confirmed that you are in charge. And another example of this, which I'm going to read, is, so let's say Wanda, we're going to introduce Wanda today too. After hiring her support staff, Wanda notices patterns in her staff that are not meeting the expectations they mutually agreed to when they were hired. Her staff has been arriving late. They're overusing their cell phone instead of focusing on tasks with Wanda and taking long, let's say 10 or 20 minute bathroom breaks that are not, scheduled. And Wanda Wanda communicated this. She communicated her concern to people she trusts and asked for their advice. So after talking to her supports, possibly maybe family members, her friends, regional center perhaps, she decided to meet with our staff and have a conversation about what she's seen and how she would like to see a change within her staff. She also lets them know that if they don't change, she might have to look at other options, such as maybe firing her staff and getting new staff, or, again, maybe there's a disciplinary action. Maybe she has to, write them up for these actions, perhaps. And so she may choose to fire them. She may choose to get new supports. In this way, we're always listening, though. Again, she was talking to the regional center. She's talking to her staff, always listening to what Wanda wants and what's going on with Wanda, and making sure that we reflect her wishes, because it is her program. Now, Wanda can always ask for as little or as much support when it comes to having conversations like this. She might have one of her friends help her with the conversation, or she might want to do it herself. The point is, Wanda is the one who is in control, and we confirm that it is about her and she makes those choices. So now that I've introduced the 5 principles of self-determination, I will pause again for any Q&A that we would like to start.
Yes, thank you for those nice examples. Yes, we do have lots of questions. Can we have the same services on the regional center then more hours through SDP?
So again, that question has already come up. And it's not about, you might have more hours for a service in self-determination, but again, it's not about, self-determination's main goal is not to get you more hours. It's, again, to create a personalized plan for the participant that is really centered around those goals in their IPP, and how can we be creative outside of the traditional system to meet those goals by using different supports and services that exist within our communities that might not be accessible through the traditional system.
Okay, the next, it says, is ABA included in SDP or different service?
Yes, ABA, you can get ABA under self-determination.
Is SDP a way to lessen the service coordinator load?
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily lessens service coordinator load. Your service coordinator is still going to be just as active as they were in your traditional program. So they're not going to be working any less under self-determination. They will still be an intricate part of the program, because they're the ones that have to enter your services into the system, make sure that the money is there for paying for the services, basically. So there are still processes in place that the regional center and the service coordinator have to perform in order to make sure the program is successful and works.
How can I join the self-determination program?
We will talk about that at the end of this presentation.
Okay. We will upload the video in a PHP website. So look for it. I would say not next week, because we have to edit it and then upload it. It takes a few days, and Monday is a holiday. So and 2 weeks from today, look for it. You're going to find it. And also we're going to share the PowerPoint that Joe created, and we translated to Spanish and Vietnamese. So everybody's going to get the PowerPoint. Thank you. Can you email the recording? Will we have a new service coordinator, or can our social worker remain the same?
That is a question for your regional center. It will differ between each regional center. And I know that some regional centers are keeping the original service coordinators. Some have shifted to new service coordinators, but I believe too that in the long run, regional centers are going to let families keep their original service coordinators. But again, you need to have that conversation with the regional center.
So I guess this was answered before, but I'll repeat the question. It says, if my ward is 16, can he still apply for this program?
Yes, so anyone 3 years or older qualifies to enter self-determination.
This person says that she's confused on the difference between self-determination versus regional center. Can you elaborate?
Again, the difference between self-determination, the main difference between self-determination and traditional is that you can only get certain services under the traditional system through the regional center, because every service and support has to be vendored through the regional center and traditional system. In self-determination, your services and supports don't need to be vendored by the regional center, which means you have a larger pool of options to actually render, or for people to provide services and supports, organizations to provide services and supports, than you did in the traditional system.
Will this be covered later? How are SDP service paid for? From our own budget?
Yes, we will cover that later.
Okay. Please give me more details about the services for adult that needs 24/7 hour care.
Well, again, so everything is going to be personalized to each individual. So if you have an IPP that calls out the needs for 24-hour service, then that will be something that will be, as we talk about later, a budget, your individual budget will be baked into an individual budget, which then you'll be able to use those dollars to find those supports and services that will address that need.
Thank you, Joe. Few more questions and then we will continue. What type of services are eligible under self-determination? Is there, for example, music therapy, horseback riding, swimming? It is covered under.
So yes, these are all covered in certain ways. Again, it depends on addressing the direct need from your IPP. And that's you'll be working with the regional center to identify how that actually fits. And again, later on, we'll talk about kind of more, there's certain service codes, there's certain service definitions, but these definitions are all very broad so that you can then plug in certain needs into certain definitions. And there will be people in this program to help you figure that out along the way as well.
Thank you. One more question and then we will continue. Is it would respite hours be affected?
No, they would not be affected if you still needed respite and you had respite in your IPP. That would still be something you could still access under self-determination.
Thank you. Well, you may continue.
All right. Oh, well, actually, I wanted to do an engagement part real quick. So I wanted everyone to use the chat. So this might be use the chat. Just put in the chat. What do you think is one of the supports that you would need or your loved one would need in self-determination? We talked about supports as your team, or a service. So what is a support that someone could just put in the chat, type in the chat? Oh, I need respite. I need socialization in the community. Exactly. And that's a great way to use self-determination. People have been using different methods of social, depending on what the need is for your participant or for yourself. It could be, I know there's dance classes in the community people are taking. I know people are actually using date or matchmaking coaching, people to actually meet people in the community. These are all different things that can be used. Aquatic therapy, music, yes, definitely. All of these are great examples. Getting an education. So is there certain classes you want to take at a local community college or whatnot? These are all great things that you can access through self-determination. Again, as I said too, as long as they fall under the service codes of self-determination and the broad definitions of self-determination, you'll be able to then plug them into your actual personalized plan. So again, as long as, there are some policies and rules that we do have to follow, but we're able to access a lot more different services and supports than we are in the traditional system, basically. And you no longer have to have the regional center telling you, here's where you're getting your service, basically, or here's the options you have. You can only pick from this list, per se. So that's, again, something to think about when you're looking at self-determination. So thank you. I appreciate all the great ideas here. Swimming, yes. Socialization, keyboard classes, yes. Again, yeah, as long as these things connect to your IPP and a goal that you're trying to reach, that you and the regional center have created on your IPP, basically. So next slide. So who, again, we're going to get now more in detail about who can participate in self-determination. So you have to qualify first to receive regional center services, as I've already stated. You live at home, in the community, or a group home. If not, you are in the process of moving into the community from a long-term healthcare facility. So let me go into depth about what I mean by long-term healthcare facility. So if you live in like a licensed long-term healthcare facility, such as a developmental center or an intermediate care facility, you're not eligible unless you are in the process of moving into the community. So but you can work with the regional center, and the regional center can help you develop a person-centered plan to do that transition, to move into the community, to move out of, your long-term healthcare facility, and then also transition into self-determination. Examples of long-term health facilities are skilled nursing facilities, as I already stated, developmental centers. There's the intermediate care facilities, adult residential facilities. Other settings that are in question would just have to be evaluated, basically. So if you're not sure if you're in a setting or your loved one is in a setting that doesn't qualify technically, then again, that would be part of this process of just evaluating the setting to make sure that they are in a setting. And if it doesn't qualify, then again, you can still work with your regional center to then transition to a new setting that would qualify, or maybe that settings can actually change for your actual loved one or for yourself to be actually qualify still. So that's an example of different long-term healthcare facilities. You're going to have to attend a training for self-determination. So this, again, is just an informational meeting, but there are orientations. So you would have to attend an official orientation in order to be in self-determination. And you're going to agree to work with a financial management service, which we'll talk about a financial management service a little later. Again, some children under 3 years of age may participate in self-determination, but they have to be eligible. They must qualify to receive regional center services. So that is the speculation. So children under 3 have to have qualified. If they do not qualify for regional center services, they might, so an example would be they might actually still be getting services through the Early Start program, but you can be in Early Start and not qualify for regional center services. So just because you are in Early Start doesn't mean that you qualify for regional center services yet. So that's where you want to make sure if your child is under 3, do they qualify for regional center services? If they do, then they are able to enter self-determination. Otherwise, if you are 3 years or older, then as long as you qualify for regional center services, which most people 3 years or older do, then they would be able to enter the self-determination process. Medical, you have to actually also be Medi-Cal eligible participants. So the regional center will also help to assist if you are not, if you need to actually do that process of enrolling with Medi-Cal, they are there to help you through that process as well. The reason why this is because the regional center is trying to maximize federal funding for this program. So if you qualify for Medi-Cal, the regional center and the state is able to draw down more funds for this program to help support it. Again, the more funding the program gets, the more sustainable and strong it is, so that we can continue to provide, this program to the community, to the state, basically. So now I have another video. So this one, let me drop the link again. And I showed you how you can change the language. Let me drop the video link in the chat. And here is Kendall. He actually is in self-determination. So he is kind of like the example we talked about before with Amy, and she likes photography. Well, Kendall really likes creating videos. So part of the self-determination program that he created was to help him learn how to create videos, how to post them on YouTube. And so he was able to make a program in self-determination that really helped towards this goal of becoming, you know, a professional director or videographer, basically. So let's watch this video, and he'll kind of explain to you what regional center services look like.
Y'all, welcome to Adventures with Kendall. Today, we're going to see some special friends of mine at Santa Valley Regional Center. Now, if you know me, I'm autistic, which means I'm going to need some help. And the CVRC has always given me help and support throughout my life. In fact, without them, Adventures with Kendall would not be here. So let's go to the Central Valley Regional Center and check out these wonderful people. Now, before we go into a regional center, let's ask what a disability is under state law. The state of California considers developmental disability as a disability that begins before a person's 18th birthday, continues or can be expected to continue indefinitely, or presents a significant disability in 3 or more functional life areas. The story of the California Regional Centers starts in 1969 with the passing of the Lanterman Developmental Disabilities Act, proposed by Assembly Member Frank D. Lanterman. This act would establish 21 regional centers throughout the state of California to help anyone with disabilities within the state. Our focus is the one in the Central Valley, the Central Valley Regional Centers. The categories of developmental disabilities include autism spectrum disorders, or ASDs, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, intellectual disability, and other conditions similar to intellectual disability. The disability I have is autism spectrum disorders. I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3 at our first location, the CVRC office in Visalia. I'm at the Visalia offices of the Central Valley Regional Center. Here, I received services as a child. The CVRC provides lifelong services and supports individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. The CVRC works together as partners with their served individuals, families, service providers, local communities, and the government. The CVRC provided services to make day-to-day life better, such as behavior and nutrition assessments. However, my mother and I moved to Merced so I could attend Merced College. It was there that we went to our next stop, the CVRC office in Merced. Welcome to the Central Valley Regional Center in Merced. In Merced, they help me transition into an adult. This includes independent living skills, including riding the bus, cleaning house, cooking meals, and going shopping. But after transitioning to Fresno State and eventually graduating from there, I'm now getting my services at our next location, the CVRC office in Fresno. Here, I am part of the self-determination program. It is through this program that Adventures with Kendall was created. Welcome to the Central Valley Regional Center office in Fresno. Let's go inside. Now, before we go even further, we need to make sure our appointment's arranged by the receptionist. That's the first thing you need to do here. And it looks like our appointment is ready. Let's get going. Throughout these halls, there are small meeting rooms. Within these meeting rooms, individual planning can be arranged through the CVRC staff, the disabled person, and a family member. They also have rooms for families with children. As we continue walking through these halls, we head to our next destination, the San Joaquin Conference Room. Thank you, Everett, for opening the door for us. The CVRC provides assessment and diagnosis, lifelong individual planning, services identified in the individual plan, coordination of service, training and support for served individuals, family and providers, and many more services. Both meetings or training seminars for services are held in either the small or big meeting rooms. Yes, sir. The Central Valley Regional Center is a great place for anyone within the disability community. But now let's head back to our studio. I hope you learned a lot about the Central Valley Regional Center. As a lifelong client, I am so blessed that they have helped me over the years, especially with the creation of this show. If they can help me bless the world, they'll help you use your gifts to bless the world too. Anyway, next week's episode will take us to Georgetown, Colorado to visit the Georgetown Loop Railroad. It'll be a
And so, yeah, that is an example of kind of someone who has taken the program, looked at what their wants and also their needs were, and then developed goals to reach those specific, wants and desires, and actually then use supports through the regional center to get what they needed to reach that goal. And again, this was a specific example to the Central Valley's Regional Center, but these were all every point that Kendall hit during the video is a support and is relevant to all regional centers. So your specific regional center does the same things. So again, if you need help in understanding that, make sure that you're reaching out to your service creator or your regional center specifically to ask how they can attend to each of those needs, or what, as Kendall was talking about, and those supports. So next, I actually wanted to go over a flow chart of what self-determination actually looks like and kind of the steps to self-determination. Again, as we talked about the process itself, there is responsibility. There's a lot more authority and planning. So here's kind of what it looks like when you're thinking about joining self-determination and the steps to join. So the first part is you actually decide that you want to explore it. So you're going to attend an informational meeting. This is an informational meeting. And then again, once you decide you want to move further, you'll attend an orientation, because that is what is required in order to join the program, is an actual orientation. And then you'll want to tell your service creator at your regional center that you want to start the process of onboarding to self-determination. So the first step is the orientation, and then talking to your service coordinator about your want to actually look into self-determination. During that time, then after that, the regional center is going to share with you an initial budget, which we'll go over the budget in a little bit. And your team is going to look at kind of, hey, what are our needs? What do I need? What different things can happen in self-determination to reach those goals that we want to create for ourselves or for the participant. And another thing to note is that once you do have a budget, that the regional center certifies that. So that's all happening while simultaneously, you're doing your own person-centered planning. You're looking at the different parts of self-determination, the different entities in self-determination that can help you through the process, which is your FMS, your financial management service, which we'll go over what that is in the next slide or two. And you also have an independent facilitator as an option, which we will talk about what that is as well. So you'll be talking to all of these different people, helping to create that person-centered plan. Then that will inform also any unmet needs. You're going to explore where you might receive services during this time. That once you talk to your SC, you're basically in the exploring time of the process. You're thinking about, okay, so here are my needs, here are my wants, here's what can connect to actual goals in my IPP. Now, what services and supports can I use to reach those goals, or that support those goals basically on my IPP? And then once that all comes into fruition, you're going to be writing an initial spending plan. So kind of more of a draft of how you're going to spend your individual budget, that initial budget, and what services and supports that do qualify under self-determination will be used. So once you get through all that exploration process, basically, you're going to be writing your IPP with your service creator and your team using that person-centered plan that you develop. So we've been doing person-centered planning. We're thinking about all of our hopes and our dreams and where we can receive different services and supports in order to reach those goals. And so then we're going to take all that information and we're going to actually put it in a formal document, the IPP, the individual program plan. Then again, you're going to decide services and supports that you need, which you should have been talking about during that exploring process. You're going to estimate costs, or you're going to get the actual costs. Maybe you know who's actually going to provide the service and you know how much it's going to cost. Then the service creator at the regional center is going to complete your authorization. So basically authorizing payment for certain entities in your self-determination program. The financial management service will be one of the first ones to be authorized, since they will be involved during this process. And then when you're actually onboarding all of your services and supports, this next square, the FMS is going to verify service provider qualifications and background checks. And we'll talk a little bit about that more too later in the slides. And your FMS and IF, which is an option. So remember, your independent facilitator is optional in this program. Will finalize service provider agreements. So if you're hiring people, you're probably going to have some kind of contract. It might look like a job description. It might look, have a service agreement, it might be a contract, to make sure that everyone knows kind of what they're responsible for, and you have something to kind of work off of when it comes to holding people accountable. And you and your SC, FMS, and IF will finalize the spending plan. And then the SC and the Regional Center Fiscal Department are going to make sure that they input everything into the system to make sure everything is correct and ready to go. That is, also authorizing the money, the payments for all of your different supports and services that the financial management service will need. And once that is all in place, then we'll be able to flip the switch and begin the actual program. So something to look at here, and that you should be familiar with, is there are lots of things that are still the same in self-determination. There are certain, you're still using your service creator, you're still getting help from the regional center. There's still person-centered planning happening. You still have an IPP, that individual program plan. And now with self-determination, you have these additional items, or people. You have your financial management service, you have an individual budget now, and you have an independent facilitator as an option as well. So there are now other parts of the whole program that are now in play when you have self-determination. Again, because it is more personalized and it is focusing on being more creative about services and supports. These are additional items that are required, except for the independent facilitator, that is an optional person to include. But these are all things that are required for self-determination. But remember, that person-centered plan is really where it begins. That is what's going to be crucial. That is what's going to help you create your IPP. And that is what's going to help the regional center then put in all of the, in the back end, put everything in the system for how to get your services and supports paid for, and working with your financial management service. So again, that person-centered plan really is still the cornerstone of self-determination. You can hire someone to help with this, or you can gather your friends and family to create your own plan during person-centered planning. Again, independent facilitators are not required, but we have heard from people enrolled in self-determination that they were very helpful for services that haven't been located yet. So let's say that you want to, that you're going to need support for maybe you're learning to cook. Maybe part of your program is, community in-home skills that you're learning, and maybe you want to have a coach come in and help you to learn how to cook. Perhaps you haven't found that person yet. Maybe you don't know who's going to do that yet. You can still put into your program that support and not have to put a name, not have to put an agency, but then you would just make sure that you have that actual service there in your plan, and you have an estimated cost basically. So you'll be able to, you don't have to have all the answers right away. You want to make sure that you're developing a program that is going to address your needs, but also we realize that you might have to take a minute to find a staff. You might have to take a minute to find the right organization or business to help with your support or with your service specific program, basically. Remember that there are many resources out there to help you through this process. At the Regional Center, you have your service creator. There's actually a new position at the Regional Center called the Participant Choice Specialist, who will also help to kind of determine what services and supports qualify under self-determination and help to locate that basically. You have family resource centers at the regional centers that will also help with this. That's basically helping to find different supports and services within the community. You have we have different self-determination support groups that are out there statewide that you can connect with. There's tons of information online about self-determination and YouTube videos that help, such as kind of the one we just saw about Kindle. And so there's definitely a lot of supports out there. There's even detailed checklists that go into more detail than this flow chart that are out there that you can access to be able to help you get through the program. So again, you ask your regional center about self-determination, ask them about the resources they have, such as checklists like this to help you through the process so that you can, again, be as the responsibility and keep track of kind of where you are on the onboarding process. Let's see. So is there any questions about the process before we go into talking about the financial management service?
The process, let's see. We talk about the vendors. If someone is asking if the vendors have to be authorized to give services. You said you're going to talk on the future. Does the self-determination provide vendors?
So the self-determination, again, the vendors, there is no list of vendors in self-determination. You are able now to go out into the community and find your services and supports that are not necessarily vendored by the regional center. The regional center has a list of their vendored service providers, and you can always use that as well. But again, you're not limited to the list of service providers in the regional center.
There is a question regarding to the budget. How the budget is determined?
We will get into it.
Yeah, we were going to look into. If we find our private caregivers, there are no agency workers, how can we pay them through SCP? We're going to say it under financial management?
Yes, so you would pay them through the financial management service, and you would be able to pick who you wanted to be your actual staff or support, basically, and you wouldn't have to go through an agency technically if you didn't want to.
Yeah. Can I change the plan if I need to add or remove services, or is set for 1 year and can only change after 1 year only?
No, you'll be able to call a meeting. Basically, if you need to change your program, you can call a meeting and you can have the program revised, basically.
Can I attend to the orientation only when dates are available within our regional center, or can they go to any other regional center?
That is you would have to ask your regional. You would have to ask your regional center about that.
So the regional center is the one who has to give the authorization to attend to other orientation in another regional center or another agency. Let's say PHP wants to put an orientation together, then the parents had to go and ask the San Andres Regional Center to come to our orientation, and it's to be validated by them.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, someone is asking, is the website for orientation courses working? I watch all 8 parts of every orientation online, and it's not recognizing on the website that I have completed the orientation. Also, can you talk specifically about what the next step is after the orientation is completed?
So we went over that in the flow chart where we said basically after the orientation, you're talking to the service coordinator, and then you're going to start with your person-centered planning. And if you aren't showing, that's a regional center question as well. Since I would assume the orientation was through your regional center, you would want to make sure that they have captured that you've attended the orientation, or you would want to ask them specifically about how you make sure that you have that covered.
How is the pay allocated? Do we receive a budget from the regional center first and allocate this to the service provider, or do we need to ask for reimbursement? Do we need to consider this allocated budget as our income and have ourselves a W-2 for us and the service provider?
No. So the regional center will establish a budget, and it's the regional center funds. It is not your own personal funds. And the money all comes from your financial management service. So we'll get into that when we're talking about the financial management service.
Mhm. We have a regional center vendor through whom we have service providers that meet our needs through traditional plan. Is there any change in who can continue to be a vendor after SCP?
Yes, you can still use your original vendors if you would like. It's just, again, you now have more options because you could go outside of those vendors too.
Okay, I think all the other questions are not related to process. As SCP will interfere with IHSS hours that one is already receiving.
No, IHSS is a different system or support system, basically.
Can I be that person that organized my son's life manager and not contract other people for work, or it is not possible for parents?
Yes, parents can help inform what this looks like. Again, depending on the participant's age and ability, you might inform what this program looks like and who is hired and whatnot. Yes, that is true. But if you are the primary care provider and it's a actual someone who is a child, you can't get paid to do that, though, if that's the question.
Okay, thank you. If it's someone is looking for a group home for their adults, and they can add it as a part of self-determination?
As long as the group home qualifies under that, again, the assessment, the setting, as long as it would qualify under the setting for actual HCBS, basically is what it's called, but for the setting. So that would, as long as it qualifies, it would be fine. But if it doesn't qualify, if the group home is some kind of intermediate healthcare, facility or whatnot, like we talked about before, then it wouldn't qualify.
Where they can find the list of services?
So there,
self-determination.
So the services are, and I'm not sure that we get into it in this presentation because it's kind of a vast overview, but they are located on the DDS website under the self-determination webpage.
Well, you continue, I can search for it and put it on the chat for the parents. Do you want to continue? Because we have a very long list of
Let's continue.
Yes.
So now we're going to introduce the financial management service. Again, this is one of the required entities that you have to have for self-determination. They are the people that actually pay basically your supports and your services, your staff. So the financial management service is going to help with the spending plan that you create, which we'll talk about the spending plan in a little bit. They receive money from your budget from the regional center to pay for your service providers and items. They keep track of the service provided. They're going to maintain financial records and give monthly reports to you and the regional center showing where those funds went. And it's going to be broken down into different categories of your actual, program. It's going to tell you how much money was spent in the previous 30 days, and it's going to show you the amount remaining in your budget actually too. They're going to take care of accounting for all your taxes, workers' compensation, liability insurance for any people that you hire. They're going to make sure that all provider legal requirements are met. So such as if you need licenses, certifications, background checks, they're going to handle all that. And background checks, just so you know, are actually done by the Department of Justice, and the Department of Developmental Services, DDS, is the one that actually contracts them to run those reports. So they come from DDS, and they're going to let you know if the person you would like to hire is qualified to render or give services to you, basically. And something to know and that we've seen throughout the program is that you should involve your FMS as soon as possible to help guide you and your team through the financial part of this process. The FMS does not make any decisions on how your money is spent. It really emphasizes the principle of authority, freedom, and responsibility. You are the one who develops your own program, your own budget, how much you're paying, how much people are getting paid. So the FMS only goes off of your plan, and that is where the money goes. So they are kind of this piggy bank sort of that holds your money, and all they do is give the money to the people that you have told them to, basically. And at the increments that you tell them. So that is the financial management service. Now let's talk a little bit about the independent facilitator. I introduced that independent facilitator as an option in the flow chart that we went over. So the independent facilitator can help you and is optional, but they can help you make informed decisions regarding your individual budget, so the money that you have for the program, find, access, and coordinate the services and supports in your IPP, help you identify your needs and find options to meet those needs. And they can help you by leading, participating in, and or advocating for you during the person-centered planning process at your IPP meeting. Again, that's the individual program plan. So again, you're not required to have an independent facilitator, but we've seen that people have found it very helpful in the program. An independent facilitator is a person who can help you carry out your program. They can help you manage your staff. They can help you write your person-centered plan, your independent program plan, your IPP, and your spending plan. DDS directive says that an independent facilitator is paid, but you would pay for an independent facilitator, but you cannot have an independent facilitator paid who is a parent of a minor or the spouse of a participant. So those are the only conditions where independent facilitators who were either parents of a minor or were a spouse of a participant, they would be doing basically be an independent facilitator for free. They would not be paid. But otherwise, if they don't fall under those two speculations, they could be paid to render independent facilitator services. So now let's actually go a little more in depth about person-centered planning. So again, like I said, person-centered planning is the cornerstone of self-determination. It is what's going to inform everything else in your program. So it's basically about planning your future. Again, it's about discovery. It's about talking about what you or the participant, are their wants, their dreams, but also what their needs are as well. You invite people that you trust when you're having these conversations. Ask friends, ask family, where can you find services and supports that might be right for you? Start to think about all these things. You're identifying what you like and what you're good at. You're gonna also think about meaningful goals in your life, and you're gonna choose where those services and supports are going to come from that are gonna help you meet these goals, basically. Again, if you have an independent facilitator, which is an option, they should be included in this process. Depending on the age and ability, as we said before, your parent or the primary caregiver might be heavily involved in this process as well. It's not about what's available, it's about what's possible. So again, it's just a mind shift from traditional services where, these are the only options we have, as opposed to now, what else is possible now? Being more creative about what's in the community. What do you want in your life to make you happy and healthy? What kind of support do you need to reach that happiness? What do you need to live a meaningful life? How will you get your supports and services? Again, it's not just about your goals and your dreams, but what services and supports will you need in order to reach them? So where will you actually get those services and supports? That should be a huge second part of your person-centered planning, basically. And they should be, your goals should be outcome-based. So I have a quote here from the law. It's comprehensive person-centered planning, including the individual budget and services, are outcome-based. So we really want to focus on what is the outcome, what are we trying to achieve, and how are we measuring that? Again, person-centered planning really hits on the principles for self-determination of confirmation, authority, and freedom. So I have now another video of actually Jack's person-centered plan. I will put the link again in the chat for this, and also again show you how you can change the language. You can again go to settings, you can go to subtitle. I'm sorry. Oh, I did, sorry. Have the closed captions on. And then you can go auto translate, and then you can pick the language that you would like for auto translate for your closed caption. And let me see if this one, I think this already has closed captioning.
Now he's interested in goals. He's interested in talking about it. It moved him into being able to participate in his first IEP because he was no longer fearful about what are they going to be saying about me. I don't like to hear people talking about what's wrong with me. I don't like to hear people talk about what I can't do. If we move into, we know what your vision is, and we want to help you get there. So let's look at your strengths and let's look at how people can support you. From there, you can just grow so much because you've laid the fertile ground for growth with all that. Person-driven plan meeting focuses on your strengths and your goals and developing the vision of yourself that then drives the life that you want to create. And just like, you know, we use assessments to develop goals in an IEP. Developing the person-driven plan helps you develop goals for your life plan. It was an engagement that just carries over naturally into what his next steps are for post-school outcomes. And that was a first in his school path. I think Jack has become really aware of his talents just even in developing the person-driven plan. He's focused a lot more on his strengths, and it's much easier to talk about what he does well for him.
Also, like the tree climber, did you know?
I think for most of us, it's hard to brag on ourselves. He's right in there when he gets to talk about what his strengths are, and it's enabled him to make better choices about what he really wants to do.
Wait, okay, start from the beginning. What are we looking at? See it now, Mateo.
The number one thing we needed for Jack to do was to increase his connectivity with people and willingness to participate in groups. He was very individualized, and that wasn't going to bring him what he really wanted in life. And once he started accepting other people's input, he was more open to connection, more open to working with people and seeing how that could drive him into developing the life that he wanted. Jack has really been able to move forward with his focus on his zoo travels, which are important to him. That's led to him having his Instagram channel and looking at what he can do to be involved in the community. Jack was really careful to talk about his future and look at his future because most of it was deficit-based planning. And that really shifted when we moved into person-driven planning because he was able to focus on what he can do instead of what he can't.
So yes, pretty exciting. You know, we saw there now that Jack was able to now focus on, again, his wants, his dreams, and be able to use self-determination to put supports in place and staff to help him reach those goals, as we saw with his Instagram and as we saw with his, you know, involvement with other things within his program. It was really exciting for them to be able to think about things from a more person-centered approach and look at services that can help him reach his goals. Now, I did have a question here, but I'm going to skip it for now because I want to allow more time to finish and also possibly Q&A, of course. So we'll go to the next slide, individual budget. So again, we kind of talked about this individual budget. So this is talking about where the money comes from, which I know a lot of you are probably wondering, how does this work? So your individual budget means it's the amount the regional center purchases for your services and supports necessary to implement your IPP. So this is the money that the regional center spends on the participant. And again, it's not money that is, I know that certain services are maybe allocated in an IPP, and it doesn't mean that all of the actual services are used. So you might have certain services that aren't used, and that means that the money for those services wasn't paid out. Now, your individual budget only shows the money that was actually paid out, so the money that was used. So that is what your individual budget is. And so basically, the individual budget is determined by your IPP. So that's those goals on your IPP, and then also the money that was used for the services and supports that address your IPP goals. and then what was spent in the last 12 months. So the regional center is going to run a report on all the money that was spent on the participant or you in the last 12 months. And that would be the individual budget that you would have for your program to create your services. And then also I put in here that the department may review final individual budgets that are at or above spending threshold. And that threshold is going to be determined by DDS, the department. We don't know yet what that's going to look like. But just so that you're aware as well, I know that DDS will be looking at that because they want to make sure that they are keeping the program informed and sustainable and addressing any issues that might pop up because of a threshold, basically. I'm going to go over some bullet points, basically, that the individual budget amount is based on the amount of money the regional center spent on your services in the last 12 months. It's not the amount of money authorized for services. So like I said, it's not how much service was actually in your IPP, it was how much service was actually used in the last 12 months. They're gonna send you a report, that report that I talked about. It's going to be an annual cost statement. It might be called something else like statement of services provided. Each regional center kind of has their own way of doing it. And you're going to want to, you can ask for that to be sent to you during the time that you're doing your person-centered planning, during the time that you're going to the orientation, perhaps, just to give regional center the time to get it to you, basically. And so you're not waiting for them perhaps to get it to you. So you can have different things going on at the same time where, hey, I need to get the individual budget from my regional center, but I'm also going to start doing my person-centered planning. I'm going to attend my orientation and I'm going to let the regional center know, hey, can I get my individual budget? And that's simply just by letting your service creator know, hey, I'm looking at self-determination. Can I get my individual budget, basically, for self-determination? Some amounts might not show up on your cost statement that you receive from your regional center. So these things to think about is basically talk with your service creator to determine all the services that you are using, so that make sure that they are reflected on your individual budget. And if they are not, then have your service creator help you account for those amounts so that you're aware of them, because you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of as many dollars as possible. And also, if you do choose to have an independent facilitator, they're an entity that can help you with this process as well. Something to think about too, and what comes up as well, is for people who have not been at the regional center for 12 full months or are new to the regional center. If you haven't been at the regional center for 12 months, then the regional center will go through a process of figuring out kind of what services you would have received during the year, and then calculate an average cost of what would have been paid for those services. And that is how they will then create your individual budget that you will use, and it will reflect then 12 months of service technically. Again, this is done to determine the cost of services and supports that you would have spent, that would have been spent on you, so that the average cost should reflect the supports and such you would have used and identified in the traditional service system. Any adjustments that happen to your individual budget will be documented in your IPP as well. And the actual budget itself will also be included in your IPP when you're going through self-determination. So that is how the budget is actually determined. There is also some circumstances where your budget might change. So that is the next slide. Again, we talked about unmet needs. So that's actually those, like I said, those services that maybe were on your IPP, but you didn't use. You didn't use them probably because you couldn't find a provider, or there was an issue with that actual agency or whatnot. So it was a need that was identified on your IPP, but it wasn't used. So it was an unmet need, actually. So that is something that you can then say, hey, this was on my IPP. I didn't actually get to use it because I couldn't find someone or whatnot. It's still an unmet need. It still needs to be added back into the budget. So basically, that money still needs to be included in my new individual budget. So that's an unmet need. Other examples of unmet need are the provider was too far from your home and it was just too difficult to use the service. You were waiting for an open spot in a program. You couldn't find that staff, that provider. Another way that you can have, you can change your individual budget, is if you have a change in circumstance. So, things change, life happens. You know, you might be transitioning from school to adulthood. So maybe your services are going to change. So you're going to have more needs or less needs, perhaps. Maybe you got sick and you were in the hospital for a while, so services weren't rendered during that time. And so that was a change in circumstance. So we need to account for that and make sure that that services are still added into your budget that you would have used, maybe perhaps. So examples of this are, you know, leaving and entering school, as I said, losing or getting a job, getting very sick or getting better, moving into your own apartment, or moving back home with your family. Those are all examples. And through the person-centered plan, because again, that is again the cornerstone, you're going to identify what these unmet needs are or what those changes in circumstances were. And you want to make sure that those are noted and accounted when you're having the conversation about the individual budget with the regional center and establishing that as well. Let's see now. Once you actually identify any changes or unmet needs, those two also have to be documented in your IPP and will be attached to your IPP as well. So this is the individual budget and how it is determined and how you can change it. I'm now also going to talk about the spending plan. So the difference between your individual budget and your spending plan is that the individual budget is how much money is available to buy and purchase your services and supports for self-determination. Your spending plan is how you're going to use those funds to create that program, how you're going to spend those funds on your services and supports. So the spending plan tells us where you're going to get your services, what services are you getting, how much they're going to cost, et cetera, et cetera. So your spending plan is a plan that shows how the individual budget funds will purchase the goods and services and supports that you will need to carry out your IPP. It identifies the cost of goods, services, and supports that will be purchased with the regional center funds. And your spending plan cannot exceed the funds at the end of your individual budget. So you cannot go over the individual budget that you and the regional center develop. So this is actual in the law. So what that means is it's a plan that shows how you're going to spend your money, basically, and it's linked to goals in your IPP. It shows how much each item is and what it'll cost. And again, you can't go over that individual budget. So the spending plan development really emphasizes all 5 principles of self-determination, the responsibility of developing it, making sure you have those supports that you need to create to access and to reach those goals in your IPP, the confirmation that you are the one who decides where you're going to get your services and supports and how much they're going to cost, how much you're going to pay for them actually, and the authority to decide that as well, and also the freedom of choice in general on what your program and supports are going to look like in your spending plan. One last thing to think about with your spending plan is goods, items, and services must be eligible. So that's, again, there are parameters that your items and services have to meet. And you and your team decide what services and supports you'll spend your money on. So you'll have support throughout this process to figure out, hey, okay, I need this support and this is how I'm going to get it. And you'll have people there to help inform kind of what that will look like. Another thing to remember is that, and I'm going to talk about this later in the presentation, is that these services and supports must meet the codes and the actual definitions for services for self-determination. I believe that Claudia did enter those spreadsheets into the chat so that you can link them. You can click on them to see them. And that is a list of the actual service codes, and then also more of a document that gives you the definitions of each of those codes. So again, these are vast codes that are meant to be able so that you can actually fit in a specific service or support into these broad definitions and categories, basically. And also it has to meet home and community-based service criteria. And we're going to go over the home and community-based final rule in a little bit. So don't worry about that. But those are the main criteria that you're going to have to meet when it comes to supports and services and self-determination. They're going to have to be services that qualify for self-determination that are on the list that we just left in the chat. And they also have to meet HCBS, home and community-based services criteria. So who can you hire? There are some requirements. So again, home and community-based final rule, which we will go over in our next slide. Some services will require credentials, licenses, or qualifications. So if you need therapy, there might be a license required for certain therapy. So we'll need to make sure that those licenses are valid and in place. You know, there might be health and safety needs that have to be met. That's part of also the requirement of self-determination. We're making sure that you're in the community, but you're also healthy and safe. And there might be background checks that need to be provided and done for the people that you choose to work with or hire. And under self-determination, the requirement is if someone is providing direct personal care, then they do need a background check. So direct personal care is defined by its assistance with dressing, grooming, bathing, or personal hygiene services to a participant in self-determination. And even family members who do this are required to be background checked as well. So you can find a company, agency that you're comfortable with, and remember that you can use your team, your family, your extended friends, your extended family, community members to help you think about, okay, where could I find supports and services that would directly relate to this need in my IPP? Again, we're emphasizing principles of freedom and authority and responsibility when we're talking about coordinating services and picking supports. So I'm going to stop again for a second before we go to the next slide, which talks about the HCBS final rule. Any questions? Do we want to address any questions now?
Yeah, there are many. I've been answering some directly. I put information on the chat. You can access those links. Yes, it says, how is the pay allocated? Do we receive a budget from the regional center? I think you talk about it, and is based on the services they've been receiving on the last 12 months. Yes. But we have some questions regarding to that. There are many families that didn't use services during the last 12 months or the last 24 months because COVID, because X. So there's no budget. How that budget is going to be built.
Yes, again, remember that that's a change in circumstance. COVID is a change in circumstance. So, so that would mean that if COVID had not happened, you would have the conversation of what services would have been utilized. And then that needs to be factored in and put into an individual budget, basically.
How the unmet needs also will support that budget, or how that happened? Because I know, and this is what I heard from many families, is that I'm only use respite hours, so I don't have enough. And we talk a lot about unmet needs. Can you explain that a little?
Well, unmet needs are needs that were in the IPP that were not used, or new needs or supports that were developed that were found during your person-centered planning. So a family might need more respite hours, but it doesn't mean they have to qualify for more hours technically. So if the regional center, and that's a regional center internal process, and if that's when you have that conversation and they assess how many hours you qualify for. Now, so that is what its regional center sets, and that is how the allocation will come, what you'll get for your respite hours, basically. So that is where that budget will be determined. It is a set amount that the regional center sets. So if just because a family says they need more respite hours doesn't mean they qualify for more respite hours. And it's honestly about what you qualify for under regional center is what's going to affect your individual budget.
Okay, thank you. The independent facilitator should be certified. Anybody can be an independent facilitator. What they can find a list of independent facilitators that can.
So yes, there are certain requirements that an independent facilitator needs. They're not very heavy. They just need to know the principles of self-determination, and they also need to agree to certain qualifications, basically. And again, that's only if they want to be paid. So you can have an independent facilitator that isn't paid, that then doesn't have to then necessarily meet certain qualifications. There is a directive on DDS's website that actually talks about what the qualifications for an independent facilitator is, or what they need to meet. So again, part of this curriculum, we would go into depth in another module about what that looks like as well. But again, you can find that information on DDS's website on what independent facilitator, the qualifications of an independent facilitator.
Okay, thank you. How long does it take to complete the whole process of self-determination?
It varies. It's as everyone is unique and different. It might take, I've heard people say it takes, as little as a month, as people have been waiting for 6 months to start, and it takes that long sometimes. And now it isn't about, length of process. Self-determination is about making sure that you get the services and supports you need, and you create a program that really addresses all of your needs. And if it takes time to do that, it's more important to spend the time up front and while you're developing your program than actually not spending the time you need and then getting into the program and having to change it. Because it actually takes a lot more time to fix something in self-determination once you've started than it does to actually take the time to develop it correctly in the beginning.
Related to that is this, if there's someone decided to get into self-determination, but at the last minute, they step back and said, no, I don't want to change anymore. Can they do that?
Yes. You can leave the self-determination program at any time.
Okay, good. Well, you answered this question already, and that was answer 2. If we are unhappy, can we go back to the traditional program? Yes, you can. Does our program help us to find suitable vendors?
So again, that's your team, and they're not vendors anymore. They're service providers, because vendors is a term from the traditional system. So yes, but your team and the regional center are all supposed to be there to help you find, services and supports for your program.
Thank you. And we have 6 more questions, but do you want to continue with the presentation for now?
Sure. So
we're close to the time. Mm-hmm.
So let's learn more about the HCBS, since we said that's part of the criteria that your services and supports have to meet.
When we talk about the HCBS settings rule, most of the time we are talking about rules that other people have to follow. But we all know rules are there for a reason, right? And in this case, you, as a person receiving services, are the reason for the rules. The HCBS settings rule is a set of rules that providers, case managers, and states must follow. They are there to make sure that you get the best services for you. The settings rule is also there to help remind people that you have rights. What are some of those rights? You have the right to privacy. This means that you can be alone if you want to, whether this is in your own bedroom or some other area of the house where you can get away from others if you want. Dignity. This means feeling good about yourself and being treated like you're worth something. Being free from coercion. This means that people cannot make you do something you don't want to do. And freedom from restraint. Keep in mind, there are different kinds of restraint, including physically holding someone to stop them from doing something, using devices like wrist cuffs or boards, tying your hands or wrists so you can't use them, using waist ties to keep you in bed or mitts to cover your hands, locking you in a room so you can't get out, keeping food away from you as punishment, and using alarms to keep you in bed or in your house, or giving you medicine to control your actions. And there's one more, and it's a big one: respect. Respect is treating other people with kindness and consideration. And it's about speaking up for ourselves and others, since we deserve other people's respect. The settings rule says that your rights must be protected at the places you receive services. This includes where you live and where you work. You have the same rights for privacy, dignity, and respect as any other person. Your case manager, direct support staff, and the state help make sure your rights are protected. The HCBS settings rule also says the places you receive supports should be integrated into the greater community. This means that where you live or where you work, like your job or day program, is not in a place that is far away from other houses, stores, or other places people go every day. You may want to go to a restaurant or to a store. You may want to go to a movie or play volleyball. If you do, your service provider should support you in doing these things, not keep you from doing them. HCBS services should support your full access to the greater community. This means you should have opportunities to find a job, do things in the community, control your own money, get to know your neighbors, and visit friends. When you develop your person-centered plan and pick your services, you should be given choices, including what are called non-disability specific options. This means that you may want to receive services or have a job in a place where other people may not have disabilities. For instance, you may want to volunteer at your public library and spend your time there. Or you may want to work at the Starbucks up the street. Or you may want to live in an apartment or house because it is close to your church or synagogue and other people without disabilities live there. It is your right to have this option. The services you are provided should optimize individual initiative, meaning you are supported to lead your life the way you want and supported to make life choices. This includes what you do each day, where you do it, and who you do it with. You have a choice in what services you get and who provides them. You can learn more in the clip called Your Life, Your Choice. Remember, these roles were made for you. They were made so that everyone, including you, the state, and providers, know that a home and community-based setting is more than where a building is or what it looks like. The HCBS settings rule helps us talk to each other about what we need to live a great life.
So yes, so that is a little overview of what the HCBS final rule means and kind of the criteria that we talked about. And again, I said, remember, settings, well, there'll be an assessment that has to happen to make sure that it is HCBS compliant. And I think, like we said, the question about, moving into a certain home where, a group home or whatnot, as long as it's HCBS compliant, it would be fine to be in the self-determination program. So we're talking about places where people get services, settings have to meet this rule to get paid in self-determination, and all services in self-determination need to meet the HCBS final rule. There is information on DDS's website that further goes into HCBS final rule. And again, those services, we shared the service definitions and codes already in the chat for self-determination. Next slide, I'm actually going to go over kind of the roles of the state and local and state organizations. So first of all, we have the Department of Developmental Services, so that's DDS. Their website is full of lots of information in regards to self-determination and HCBS. Also, they have created a new office of the self-determination ombudsperson. Her name is Katie Hornberg. She is actually an interim ombudsperson. This office is actually designed for basically if you're having any issues during your program, if you're being held up throughout the process, that's someone that you would be able to utilize to help you when you have barriers that are popping up in your process. There's also, of course, your regional center and that new position that I spoke about earlier, the participant choice specialists that is specifically designed to help families determine, their supports and services. You still have your service coordinator as well at the regional center. There's the family resource centers that are also linked to the regional center that you are with. And they are there also to help, find resources to help support through the process. Also, we have the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, where there is a local volunteer advisory committee. Usually they're called the self-determination advisory committees in your region. So if you look for the SDACs at your local regional center, that's a great place to go. And they are usually held monthly. They're meetings basically where they meet. They discuss the problems and discuss success best practices that are going on within your region. And also their main priority is to inform actually regional centers kind of how the program's going, give suggestions on how to improve the program. So your local volunteer advisory committee or your self-determination advisory committee is a great place to plug in. And that information can usually be found on your regional center website. There's also the statewide determination advisory committee, which is actually a committee that is composed of all of the regional centers' separate local advisory committees. So they each have a chair. So basically each chair sits on the actual committee and they inform basically what's going on statewide. And they're a voice that can then also inform and help to create suggestions for DDS themselves on the program. So these are all great resources that are available local and state for you. This is just another activity where I was going to introduce another case, but we can skip that for now because of time. So next steps. So basically, if you determine you want to look more into self-determination, you're going to complete your orientation. So you're going to need to do that official orientation, and you're going to tell your SC that you want to do self-determination. Then start to think about, what is your best life and what would that look like? Start that person-centered planning process. Talk to people that you trust and create a team that's going to help you through this process as well. And are going to help inform where you would get supports and services, what kind of things you need, and create your person-centered plan with your team, listing your hopes and your dreams and goals, and also where you're going to be getting the supports and services to reach those dreams and goals. And that is the end of our presentation. I know I went a little longer than was supposed to, but I'm happy to stay to answer questions if we need. Apologize for going over the timeline.
That's okay. Thank you for the great information. Now I'm gonna, before everybody leave the room, I'm gonna pull the poll, so you will be able to give us that grade that we need. So you're gonna find on your screen the poll that says in English and Spanish and Vietnamese how we did it. It was helpful, it was not helpful, and this will help us to improve our services and let our funders know that we're doing our job. So thank you, Joe. There's not many questions. I think I learned a lot from you. I've been answering the type and putting links. So you want the list of services under self-determination, find it on the chat. You want to see the video is going to be edited. It's going to take a while. So find it in 2 weeks and PHP website. And if I have the chance to share my screen, we are on the poll part. And I want to let you know, for the people who are still here, that next weekend, next Saturday, we're going to have Katie Hornberger that Joe was talking about, the AMBAT person. She is going to open the microphone to answer those questions that probably could be more complicated, that we couldn't address here. So join us, and next Saturday, we're going to have her from 10 to 12. We're going to open the microphone, and she's going to introduce herself and what her role is. So it's going to be really, really helpful. I invite you all. There's no cost again. The only thing that you have to do at the end of the session, complete the poll, and that's all that we ask from you. If anybody has a question, I think there's 2 in the chat. Let me see. Can I be that person that organize my sons like a manager and not contract other people for work, or is not possible?
I'm a little confused by the question, so I might need some clarification.
Yeah, I think this a parent wants to know if she can do the management and not hire anybody for the self-determination.
If we're talking about financial management services, manage the money, no, that is not possible. It has to be a vendored financial management service through the regional center. And then also, if you're talking about independent facilitator, which is the person that kind of helps organize the program and everything, then technically, if you are the parent of a minor, then no, you cannot be the paid independent facilitator for the program, but you can be an unpaid independent facilitator for the program. You just wouldn't be able to get paid for it.
So parents are not paid.
Yes, parents of
That
a
is
minor are
the-
not paid for independent facilitation.
So thank you. It's 12:07. We want to say thank you to Joe Hernandez for taking the time to be with us this Saturday. We also want to thanks the interpreters, Ana Vidales, and I'm going to stop sharing. Before I introduce them all, just a little announcement. PHP has open positions, so you're interested in do something meaningful. If you like what we do and you have skills to support other families and lead probably training like this, join us. We're looking for people, hopefully bilingual Spanish. If it's not, send us, it's okay. Send us your, or any other language, send us your resume and we will be happy to interview you. Yeah, and I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna, thanks to Ana Vidales, she is our interpreter. And then we have a couple more Vietnamese interpreters. They're doing Lan and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce well your name and no. So thank you so much for joining us today and take the time to learn about this. And I think it's a great program, and that's going to help in many areas, especially my personal opinion with the disparity. So thank you. Anything else that you want to share with us, Joe, before we leave?
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for all these great questions. And I definitely think that Katie will help next week with a lot of these specific questions. So I'm glad that you're going to have her, and definitely tune in to talk to Katie. She's a wealth of knowledge as well on the program. And I'm definitely, yes, I also back Claudia on saying this program is going to be a change maker for a lot of people. So hopefully you take the time to really learn about it and see how it can help with your loved one or yourself.
Exactly. So thank you so much to everybody. And I hope to see you all next Saturday. Again, we have a day for next Saturday at 10 a.m. We will be here. Thank you and have a wonderful long weekend for the one who had a long weekend. Bye.